Hello again. Welcome to this second PrivIQ lesson. Hopefully you have, well, I think it's important for you to view the first one for this one to make some sense. And what did we cover? So in the previous one, we looked at the home screen and we got a, sort of high level appreciation for the various features. And we also went into a bit of a deep dive with data mapping. And in the data mapping, we learned that that there are two steps to the data mapping itself, and then we have to close it out by completing the collection sources. Anything in red is a custom item, and we actually showed the example where we added for the employees union membership fees. Okay, and then I did say that we would look at the impact of the data mapping, and we also discussed what which of the features were dependent on data mapping, like your data subject access requests. And what we're going to discuss today is the governance as well as the employees. So, following the data mapping, we did add a line under, well, we call it the processing purpose membership fees, payment of membership fees. And we then established that we are disclosing personal data to another controller, which was the actual union itself. Okay, and by doing that, it would have created a form here. But let's look at the processes section to see what the impact would have been of any processes that we added in the data mapping. Okay, so here there's a checklist, but we will discuss checklists in subsequent video. What happened was we added in another session we added a processor called well, we added various processes that would have been where those forms would have been created here in the register. What you're seeing here is the clients, and this has got to do with where your organization as a controller or also a processor. Okay, but we will cover that in another session. Today, what we're going to look at, what is the impact of adding processes in data mapping and what we need to do in the processor register to close it out. So again, a lot of important information here, especially so, for example, if you're dealing with transfers of personal data personal data to the US, etc. Okay, so important to understand what's in those description boxes. So here we have a number of processes, and looks like all but one, oh, actually two, are outside of the EU. So we'll be talking about the EU GDPR template here. So let's look at this particular one. So yeah, so you've got the processor name, the processor type, the country where they are, and then if there's any lawful basis required for transfers outside of the EU, and then what the status of the contract is, whether it's in progress or whether it's been signed or whatever the case might be. All right, let's take Paula's payroll. That's a good example. And we would have added Paula's payroll in the data mapping, to pay payroll on behalf of this particular company. And then what we would need to do is we would have added some personal data types in there. So let's go into the form. And the first thing we need to do here is, okay, so if there wasn't a processor type, that's important to put that in. And then we then need to go to the data mapping and say, so of all those personal data types we identified in that for that particular processing purpose, which of the personal data types are being processed by, in this case, by Paula's payroll. So we might say, well, identification number and confidential correspondence. Why is it important to do this? Because this information here informs a report that under reports, you are able to extract directly to Excel. And if we had to extract in there, we had to extract for all our processes, then we wouldn't see any information for Paula's payroll. I don't think for payroll purposes, we'd be processing any special category information. In this case, it's the the health information, so it's probably unrelated to Paula. The other thing that you might need to do if from in this case from the EU's point of view, if you were transferring to another country, you would need to say what that lawful basis is, and I'll show you in the next one what I'm actually meaning. So that's essentially the minimum amount of maintenance that you need to do within the form. You can also add notes and files, that might be relevant to this particular processor. All right, so let's save that. Okay, and what I was referring to earlier is here we have a hosting, Adobe hosting uh, in Antigua and Barbuda, and we're saying, well, okay, that's outside of the EU, so let's see what the options are. So it's asking us for that legal basis, okay, and that could be, a bigger pardon, click here. So, from specifically from GDPR, Article 46, you would need to say what that lawful basis is. And, in this case, we said it's because we're using standard approved EU data transfer contractual clauses, your SCCs. And then we need to go through and upload, the valid copy of that particular contract. And like we would have done also for Paula's as well. And then indicate that it's signed. Okay, so that's essentially what needs to happen within the processes section following your data mapping. Okay, right. So let's go back home, and what we're going to look at is in the governance space. So now the data mapping is complete. If you recall from the first video, we ran the validation, said, okay, everything's good. We need to go now to the next steps. Okay, so under governance, this is the first document that we're targeting, the first report rather, the record of processing activity. Most of the regulations that I've worked with all call for something akin to a ROPA. That's what they call it in short form. But before we get there, the ROPA is also calls for technical and organizational security measures. Okay, so we have two options. You can use the template. My personal favorite is to edit it because that gives me a lot more flexibility, especially where we are a controller that's also a processor. So give you a lot more flexibility in, having the ability to edit it. And, as we saw the last time, we've got those other languages here as well. So um, we then add the technical and organizational security measures, and then we go through to the actual record of processing activities. If the data mapping was not properly validated, incomplete, it would warn you here to say, go and complete your data mapping, okay? Where it's actually looking for those minimal requirements. Right, so the data mapping is, the ROPA, I beg your pardon, is informed by, by your company settings, but the bulk of it comes from the actual processing from your data mapping. All right, so these are all the requirements for your ROPA. And some regulations or some countries, they say all you need to do is make sure it's updated and keep it handy for if the regulator or the authority comes knocking. In other cases, you need to have it on your website, so it all depends. But essentially, they all call for the same information. And then these are the security measures that are added in the previous tab, and it automatically updates it there. Okay, so that's your ROPA. The next document or the next report, if you will, is your privacy notice. Now we've got two types. This is the external one, and this is the employee one. Let's look at the external one. Okay, so again, lots of information. You see we've got three types. So you've got the template, which is informed directly from your data mapping. Everything's nicely laid out there. But you can also use the editor, you know, or you can upload a PDF. Whichever option you use, you need to publish it. You can see this one was last published today. And then for the external one, there is the option to embed or rather, use this code to create a link on your company website that will say privacy notice. And then if somebody clicks it, they will see whichever one has been published here, and including, in this case, having the ability to change the languages as well. Okay, so that's the external privacy notice. And then with the employee one, sorry, I forgot to mention also that you need to set it to complete. So if you look here, you'd need to set it to complete. Okay. And similarly with the employee one, also informed by the data mapping. Okay, here's one that wasn't translated, so it wasn't published. So let me publish that. That was the Spanish one. And then, so now here you wouldn't necessarily use the code to put it on a website. Suppose if you have an intranet of sorts, yeah. But what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's marked as completed, because what that has the effect of doing is it becomes available to share with your employees in that section there. Okay, so those are the privacy notices. Fairly simple enough, but it's it's a mandatory requirement to maintain transparency with your data subjects. Okay, let's look at the internal. So we have a default set of policies and other documents that you can use for most of them. So take this one, for example. Most of them, you can use the template, or you can edit your own, or you can upload your own. Okay. So, but if you're going to be sharing that with your employees, you need to mark it as completed, then it becomes available for distribution. Like in an example with this case, let's just say this company doesn't have CCTV and they don't need the policy, then you set it to not applicable, then it doesn't become available. So it's only those that are marked as complete will become available. So you see we've got various documents here. And then we've got additional documents. Some organizations have the need for acceptable use policy, or these other standards or policies. Again, is a case of use it, don't use it. If you're not using it, not applicable. And of course, here you can actually add your own, or you edit your own, or upload your own PDF. Then we have a document library, which can either be used as a store, or as or you can actually share documents with the employees here. One caution here is that you'll see here that this one is, I'm saying show this one in the employees section. If I had to untick this, and the assumption is that it's no longer a valid document, if I, to share with the employees, any sharing that would have happened prior to me unticking it, all of that information is lost, because now it's assuming that it's no longer a valid document. It's the same as if you would delete or set any of the documents in those two tabs to not applicable. So just a caution. Okay, so here you can add manually. All right, you can add them manually, or you can actually, if your account is so enabled, like I've done with this one, you can actually generate the content using AI. Okay, I'm currently using ChatGPT 03 Mini, which at this time I think is the current version. But yeah, you can add manually, or you can use AI to generate. Then you can edit it, save it, and then publish it, and then it becomes available for distribution. Okay, so that's your document library. If there are any that you need to use or store that are not there, then this is where you actually create those documents. All right, so how do we share that with the employees? So this is quite a useful tool. It's a checklist here, but again, we will be discussing the controls in subsequent videos. So hopefully you'll join me for those. So we go to compliance, and here what we should do is add the employees. Now you can add them individually. Name, surname, job title, email address, minimum. And then you can assign them to a particular department or location. And if the employee leaves, and is no longer active, you can actually just set that particular slider there. We've just got one example of Annabelle. If you want to send emails, you can send emails globally, right? Where you've got these filters, or you can send them individually to employees. Okay, in both cases, you select the documents you want to send. You see only those that are complete are available for selection. The others are not. So select the document you want to send. And if they've got any in the library, like the one we just saw now, that was the employee code of conduct, I would select that if I needed to. Then I can customize the message to either the subject as well as the message, send the emails. When they go, they will change from not started to in progress. So like this one is in progress and it gives me the date that it was sent. Okay, this was old data, but it's still valid. So it's sitting there in progress. When the employee acknowledges receipt and having read the document, then it changes to complete and it comes through with the completed date. Okay, so quite a useful tool to manage your employee communications. And as we all know, that is one way of demonstrating compliance. Training and awareness is very important. Okay, so I think that is it for this lesson. What are we going to look at next? So I hope you join me because we're going to be talking about the data subject access requests and how to manage responses to any incidents. And then we will talk in more detail about the control checklist. So yeah, thanks again for joining me, and we'll see you on the next one.